Blood Warlock, Succubus Partner in the Apocalypse. Chapter 181 Apparition, Second Order Enemy. As for Xietain himself, he was currently doing another task. So, you can't warn me beforehand? His silhouette flickered through the trees and thick foliage at lightning speed as his voice traveled through the place. Swoosh! A 6-foot leopard leapt from the underbrush and opened its jaws wide. Its eyes seemed blood red, glowing madly, and filled with murderous intent as Xieain's figure was reflected in them. The smell of putrid flesh assaulted his nostrils, and the creature's long fangs reflected the meager rays of sunlight that pierced the thick branches of the trees. Only a mere inch from his neck, Xieain's face lingered unmoved as if unaware of the existence of the beast that was about to claim his life. Nope, Lilith's voice rang out right after his question. At the same time, Xieain's body intersected with the mutated leopard's powerful-looking body. As I said before, I cannot interfere in any way in your battles or future battles. I can only help you in small ways when the battlefield is clear of all enemies and there is not even the slightest possibility of danger, or else I will fall to a lower existence and a great part of my powers will disappear. I might even die. A sharp light flashed and slowly a line appeared on the mutated leopard's neck. The beast couldn't even let out a howl of pain as its head fell heavily to the ground and rolled a few inches before stopping just as its decapitated body fell to the ground and blood splattered the ground. I see. Xietain nodded calmly as if he already expected such a response. A message flashed in his retina. Blood will, 50%/50%. It was exactly the same message that had been flashing across his retina for several hours now, without any change. With surprising agility, even without activating lightning movement, Xieain's body flashed through the forest without stopping to look for enemies. A mutant cat appeared before him, but even before the beast could let out a menacing cry, it was cut in 2 halves. A mutant dog was cut into countless pieces in a matter of a second. A pack of 50 level 2 mutant mosquitoes burst into a bloody mess after activating blood manipulation and boiling the blood inside their bodies. Regardless of the type of enemy, Xietain slaughtered them all. In fact, it was he who was moving through the forest looking for those enemies. It was he who was aiming for their lives. What is the reason for your trepidation? Lilith's puzzled voice sounded beside him, though she was nowhere to be seen. I don't know. Xietain replied as he decapitated a mutated mantis with ease. I just feel uncomfortable, like something bad is going to happen soon. Lilith remained silent and a small frown appeared on her beautiful face. Perhaps your danger sense skill along with your blood will skill are working together to warn you of a very big danger. She didn't sound too sure about it either, but it was the only thing she could come up with since this was the first time she experienced something like this. Just as Xietain was about to reply, his face changed greatly and he stopped his steps in mid-step while concentrating his hearing to the maximum. Bang! 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 The unmistakable sound of gunshots and even the sound of some explosions were heard clearly amidst the deadly silence of the forest. But what worried Xietain the most was that's coming from the place where the bodies of the First Order beasts are. Lilith's voice reached him once again. Apparently you were right. I can sense from here the appearance of a Second Order existence. Are you sure you want to face one now? You can just go and leave them behind. Xietain gritted his teeth and did not hesitate as he charged forward in the direction of where Xietain and the rest were currently located. I'm currently at my maximum capacity. I don't think a Second Order beast can defeat me so easily. He had killed First Order existences even before he evolved. He believed that he could do the same to a Second Order as well. Lilith did not respond to his words. She secretly sighed. Because a Second Order existence was a lot more dangerous and terrifying than a First Order existence was even at the top. Xietain still had no idea how dangerous such beings were. But he would soon experience it for himself, and Lilith knew from the conviction in his gaze that he would not stop no matter what. I wish you luck. Remember that running away in times of crisis is not for cowards, Xietain. That was all she said, but he did not change his course. On the contrary, he accelerated even more. Lightning movement. Blue lightning flashed over his body like tiny mischievous snakes that appeared and disappeared in different spots. Xieain's body dashed through the forest as the sound of crackling noisily echoed everywhere as if announcing the imminent arrival of a storm. Fire! Chen, he shouted at the top of his lungs as he fired a burst of bullets propelled by his own mana at the creature in front of him. Each shot demonstrated his effectiveness as a marksman. Even with a Type 67 machine gun in his hands, every shot struck the monster's head with terrifying accuracy. Zhongde, Kai Jingyi, and the 50 armed men raised their weapons and began firing a blast of unstoppable bullets at the enemy that had appeared with the intention of turning it into a sieve. Due to the lack of military training as well as the lack of special skill like Chen He's, some bullets missed the target even though it was huge, and many of them only hit the limbs or barely grazed it. However, at a distance of barely 100 meters, it was impossible for such a large flurry to miss completely. Nevertheless, the creature remained standing on its two hind legs as it looked ahead. A glint of disdain flashed in the monster's eyes as it slowly began to advance, causing the ground beneath its feet to shake constantly as if a mini-earthquake was shaking the world every few short periods. The beast was a massive 4-meter-tall bear. Its fur was perfect white with some deep black lines in the form of archaic patterns on its chest and back. Its eyes were a startling fluorescent gold color, and the claws on its paws were surprisingly long and sharp enough to seem to be able to slice through the entire world. Bang! 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 Hundreds of bullets hit the giant bear's body per second. When the magazines of the machine guns or rifles ran out, the gunmen immediately changed the empty magazine, throwing it on the ground and hastily replacing it with a new one. However, no matter whether it was a light machine gun, rifle, sniper, pistol, or heavy machine gun, no matter the type of weapon or the caliber of ammunition used, the bullet casings fell to the ground uselessly in a constant metallic clink. Blood Warlock, Succubus Partner in the Apocalypse. Chapter 182, Second Order that cannot be defeated. Each shot from Chen, he accurately hit the bear's head with strange, archaic engravings. However, none of his attacks were effective, although there were many shots that managed to accurately hit the golden eyes of the beast thanks to Chen He's marksmanship skill. The bear with runes did not even flinch or try to close its eyelids, and simply allowed the piercing bullets to hit its eyesight. It was common sense that the eyes of every living being were the weak point. Regardless of whether it was a mighty alligator, a huge elephant, or a human being, they all had weak eyes, and any kind of attack was enough to severely damage and even destroy it. Not to mention armor-piercing bullets capable of turning a vehicle into a sieve. However, the bear with runes simply continued on its feet. Every time the bullets hit its eyes, they were repelled as if they had hit an armored plate instead of weak eyes. Damn it! A soldier shouted in a terrified voice as he replaced the empty magazine and threw it on the ground before replacing it with a new one. What the hell is this damn thing? Bing Shui. This monster definitely isn't a first order. Chen He shouted out loud in a tense voice. If it was in the past, he might not be able to differentiate between first order and something else. However, now that he was about to evolve, he could sense that the creature before them was simply on another level. Regardless of whether it was the reinforced iron boar or any other first-order existence they had encountered so far, the bear with runes was definitely beyond any of them. 50 meters away, Shangguan Bingshue's face was pale. Her expression was as cold as frost as her eyes flashed with murderous intent. She could sense that the monster before her exuded an aura of destruction so great that it seemed to be capable of overpowering everything just by its mere presence. To her horror, she realized something. This beast is even more terrifying than that man. She muttered through gritted teeth. She could faintly sense an extremely frightening aura being released by Zemin every time he fought. However, the beast before her eyes was on a completely different level. This could only mean that the beast in front of them was a second-order creature. This was the first time any member of the group had to face such an enemy, and based on the current situation alone, Shangguan Bingshui knew that the chances of making it out alive were not particularly high, unless that man comes back quickly and has some tricks up his sleeve. With a pale face, she raised both hands high in the air, and while pointing forward with her rare-grade treasure magic wand, she shouted, "Ice spears." The mana inside her body resonated with her command, and the magic she could use moved the mana to activate and shape her ice maker magical skill. The next instant, a dozen powerful ice spears over 3 meters long floated above her head. The ruined bear's eyes glowed slightly, and ignoring the rain of bullets, looked to its left just in time to feel the wind being pierced by several objects infused with mana and magic. What happened next terrified everyone. The beast opened its maw wide, and the strange engravings on its chest lit up with a strange amber glowing light. Shangguan Bingshue's face changed, and by instinct, she raised a mighty wall of ice before her just a thousandth of a second before disaster struck. Roar. A powerful sound wave visible to the naked eye filled with magic and mana traveled at astonishing speeds through the air, crashing into the 12 ice spears that were in mid-flight. Bang! 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 The ice spears exploded into countless pieces of tiny ice and fell to the ground in slow motion. Because she was the maker, Shangguan Bingshue was aware of the destruction of her ice weapons. It was just that she could not believe it. Each of those ice spears had a large portion of her total mana. A single one was enough to freeze a body part of a first-order beast, and all 12 together were more than enough to freeze to death even a level 50 first-order beast, but they were destroyed so easily. You should know that after evolving to First Order and reaching level 33 after facing the horde of unclassified beasts, Shangguan Bingshue's ice-like attacks were 20% more powerful than in the past. But even then, the beast before her destroyed her attack like they were nothing, but the unpleasant surprises had only just begun. After destroying the 12 ice spears conjured by Shangguan Bingshue, the sound wave only weakened a little, becoming somewhat smaller, before continuing on its way forward. Arg! An armed man clutched his head tightly, releasing the gun in his hands as if an excruciating pain was torturing him. His ears soon began to bleed, and before a second scream of pain could leave his throat, his head exploded in a bloody mess after a loud bang. Arg! Ugh! More than 5 armed men who were in the path through which the sound wave was traveling clutched their heads at almost the same time before, just like the previous case, they noisily exploded and stained the ground around them with blood mixed with brain matter and pieces of broken skull. The sound wave also hit the ice wall that had been erected by Shangguan Bingshue at the last second and destroyed it into thousands of pieces before finally losing its power and disappearing. Shangguan Bingshue's face was as pale as a sheet, and even her beautiful red lips seemed to have lost their color. Although she had avoided being critically injured, she could still feel her own soul shuddering as if her spirit had been harmed. In just a split second, and without moving from her spot, the rune bear had slaughtered nearly 10 people with just a roar. Xietain. A soldier shouted with tears in his eyes as he saw one of his comrades tragically dying without even being able to keep his body intact. Bastard! The same soldier seemed to have gone mad as he pulled out 2 grenades, and after removing their safety catch threw them towards the beast with all his strength. Bang! Bang! The grenades exploded immediately after hitting the creature's body, raising a cloud of dust and dirt a couple of meters high. However, even then, everyone despaired at the sight of the rune bear's head above without even moving, and its disdainful gaze seemed to become more and more mocking with each passing second. Swoosh! The dust cloud suddenly shook, and the beast's body seemed to become a blur for a moment before disappearing from everyone's line of sight. Watch out! Shangguan Bingshue couldn't help but shout. She was the only person present who could see the monster's movements with some clarity, but even then she could not match the beast. The next instant, like a ghost, the bear with runes appeared amid a group of armed men. Blood Warlock, Succubus Partner in the Apocalypse. Chapter 183. A brilliant woman, intelligent Kai Jingyi. Shangguan Bingshue's voice reached the others correctly. At the same time, she erected several walls of ice in front of the beast to obstruct it. However, none of this was enough to stop it. Swoosh! Just like a ghost in the middle of the night, the rune bear appeared in front of a militant and lowered its body to look him straight in the eyes as if it was having a lot of fun with the terrified look in the man's eyes. I'd dash. Before the militant could utter another word, the beast brandished one of its claws with a swift swing of its arm, and as if it were a sword cutting paper, the man's head detached from his body and flew several meters through the air, forming a beautiful but horrifying bloody arc before falling to the ground with a thud. Fire! A militant near the beast screamed in panic and began firing as he took aim in a hurry. However, after several clinking sounds, the militant's head shot skyward just as before, and his body collapsed decapitated as his head fell shortly after with eyes devoid of the characteristic radiance of life in them. And no, run away. Finally, some survivors could not stand the pressure at the bloody sight and began to turn around to run in different directions. Idiots! Don't run into the forest. Zhongde shouted as he threw a grenade towards the rune bear in an attempt to stop it. However, more than 30 survivors ignored his warning and ran into the forest. Not even 2 seconds later, cries of pleading and clemency could be heard from the open clearing. "Don't move from your place. There are still many beasts in the vicinity." Kai Jingyi gritted her teeth and a sparkle of resolve flickered in her eyes as she activated her most powerful skill. Crack! The sound of a lightning crack echoed across the battlefield and tiny lightning snakes began to flicker on her body. With a swing, her body disappeared from where she stood and she quickly charged towards the rune bear. Surprisingly, Kai Jingyi was using the same skill as Bai Zemin, lightning movement. Just before leaving to capture the second village, Bai Zemin had given a fruit to Kai Jingyi, and shortly after capturing the second village, a second formerly green fruit fully ripened, so he handed it over to Kong Lan. Therefore, his 2 loyal followers possessed in their arsenal of skills an active second-order peak-level skill. "Fool, don't do it!" Shangguan Bing Shui exclaimed. Although she was surprised by Kai Jingyi's skill, she could see her movements clearly as her agility was still superior to hers even with such a skill. This meant that there was no way the rune bear, who was even faster than Shangguan Bing Shui herself, could not follow Kai Jingyi's movements. Indeed, the beast's eyes flashed and its body seemed to disappear from its position before appearing like a ghost before Kai Jingyi. Shangguan Bing Shui bombarded the beast with all kinds of ice weapons, ice spears, ice swords, ice pikes, even tried to stop its movements with ice vines. But nothing worked as the runes on the beast's stomach glowed with a strange amber color, just like the runes on its chest before. All the ice spells exploded just before reaching the creature, and Shangguan Bing Shui's face lost all color after realizing that this monster possessed an active skill to block magical attacks. With a swift movement, the beast's claw struck Kai Jingyi's body, and from the other's point of view, she hadn't even had time to react. "No!" Zhong De shouted in terror as he watched the monster's claw descend on his companion's body. He and Kai Jingyi, along with Kong Lan and Fu Xiefeng, had been following Bai Zemin since the beginning. The 4 of them had become great friends and could be said to be like siblings. How could he not feel pain at seeing a cherished one about to be slaughtered but not being able to do anything? However, what happened next was unexpected by all. The sharp and seemingly unstoppable claws of the rune bear cut Kai Jingyi's body in 2. But instead of a bloody scene, what happened was that her body exploded into countless flashes of lightning that flickered and disappeared in midair. The beast's eyes flashed with a touch of confusion as if it did not understand what was happening. Just then, the air behind the creature seemed to have a strange movement, and with a loud swing of its claws, a second Kai Jingyi that had appeared was also cut in half. Bang! 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 More than 20 explosions echoed everywhere, and the earth shook fiercely as the rune bear retreated 2 steps. A roar of fury and pain escaped from its mouth as one of its claws came out from its right hand due to the explosions. In front of Shangguan Bing Shui, a Kai Jingyi with a face as pale as a sheet appeared like a ghost. She was panting noisily and was covered with sweat as if she had participated in a 50-kilometer marathon. However, her bright eyes had a glint of pride that was impossible to hide. Even Shangguan Bing Shui looked at her back with obvious praise, understanding what had happened. Kai Jingyi had used one clone to confuse the rune bear. Another clone carrying several grenades took the opportunity to sneak in from behind, and when the rune bear destroyed the clone, the grenades completely exploded and enveloped it in a burst of explosions and fire, damaging it for the first time. It was only now that Shangguan Bing Shui remembered that before evolving thanks to Bai Zemin's support, Kai Jingyi stood out not because of her strength, but because of her amazing intelligence. Although it was slight and was not completely with her strength, as she used external objects and human technology to accomplish it, the first to succeed in wounding the rune bear was none other than Kai Jingyi, who had not yet evolved to first order. The rune bear let out a second terrifying roar that made the ears of almost everyone within 50 meters begin to bleed. Through the cloud of dust, the beast's glowing fluorescent golden eyes seemed to be filled with murderous intent as it glared at the human that injured it, while the pain of losing one of its claw-like nails tormented it as blood dripped onto the ground, staining it red. The runes on its chest radiated with a bright amber glow, and a sound wave came out of his mouth again, only this time there were only Kai Jingyi and Shangguan Bing Shui in the way. Shangguan Bing Shui could have avoided the attack, but seeing that Kai Jingyi couldn't even move, she realized that all her stamina had been completely drained. What a brilliant woman! Shangguan Bing Shui was moved. Activating lightning movement and creating 2 clones as well as holding them for a few seconds had drained all of Kai Jingyi's stamina and mana. Therefore, she had made a final effort to reach Shangguan Bing Shui, as she was aware that the powerful ice mage was the only one capable of helping her now that she had lost all her battle power. Blood Warlock, Succubus Partner in the Apocalypse. Chapter 184, Invincible Second Order. In the past, the reason Kai Jingyi had managed to establish her place among the lower leaders and the reason she was able to participate in important meetings, even express ideas, and give her opinion, was because she had a brilliant mind. She was a woman capable of coming up with great ideas, and this was more than demonstrated at this moment. Roar! The dark runes on the bear's chest lit up again, and the sound wave flew towards Kai Jingyi and Shangguan Bing Shui at astonishing speeds. In fact, were it not for the clear movement of the air, it would be impossible to notice it with the naked eye. Kai Jingyi's face turned pale as a sheet and all traces of blood disappeared from her face. She no longer had stamina to run, she barely had enough energy to stand, but even that was costing her a lot. She had only managed to cut a fingernail off the rune bear at the cost of losing her combat ability. Worse yet, it hadn't even been done by herself, and the major work was done by the 20+ grenades. Fortunately, she already knew that the rune bear would attack her and had prepared for it. Swoosh! A wall of ice more than 5 meters thick appeared before her seemingly out of nowhere. When the sound wave hit the ice wall, it surprisingly did not explode just like the ice spears. It simply shuddered loudly, and Shangguan Bing Shui's face became even more pale, but the wall did not collapse. What kind of attacks are those? Shangguan Bing Shui gritted her teeth and quickly grabbed Kai Jingyi by the waist before jumping back. Bang! The ice wall exploded into thousands of pieces, revealing the terrifying face of the rune bear behind it. The enraged beast let out another rage-filled roar and stomped hard on the ground beneath its feet before its body turned into a cannonball that shot forward. Shangguan Bing Shui also knew that the rune bear would not give up until it finished off the lives of everyone here, especially Kai Jingyi, who had injured it after tricking it before. Ice spikes, ice spears, ice swords, ice arrows, ice vines. Shangguan Bing Shui continuously backed off as she cast magic spell after magic spell towards the rune bear. Although her ice creations could not pierce through the monster's defenses completely and there were barely any ice marks on its white fur, the freezing frost energy had managed to slightly decrease its agility and disturb its movements. It was only thanks to this that she and Kai Jingyi had managed to survive so far. Chen He and Zhong gritted their teeth until their gums bled, but neither of them could do anything but watch. In fact, it wasn't just the two of them. Everyone present could only watch and pray. Because the gunman's aim was not perfect, none of them dared to shoot since Shangguan Bing Shui was engaging in direct combat with the terrifying beast, and she or Kai Jingyi might end up being harmed by their own allies. The survivors also did not dare to flee into the forest. More than 30 had lost their lives, and from a distance, they could feel the bloodthirsty gaze of many mutated creatures from the shadows. It was clear to all of them that if they tried to flee, they would be torn into pieces and eaten by the wild animals. Staying would at least give them a small chance of survival. Though hopes were not particularly high, and it all depended on the beautiful silver-haired woman whose slender body flickered across the battlefield like a shadow as the rune bear chased and roared relentlessly. Although Shangguan Bing Shui's agility was high, it was still inferior to the rune bear. But thanks to her ice creations, she had managed to resist a little. Unfortunately, she soon began to run out of mana. Because the ice creations she was using to slightly restrain the bear with runes were much stronger than the ones she normally used, since the normal ones wouldn't be of any effectiveness. Swoosh! The rune bear finally took advantage of an opportunity when Shangguan Bing Shui stepped on the ground badly due to Kai Jingyi's extra weight and lost her balance, which slowed down her already inferior speed. The beast raised a claw high as its gaze, brimming with malicious intent, focused on the two women of pathetic size in comparison. All its anger seemed to be contained in this strike, as the air around it seemed to be cut into pieces as the tearing sound echoed everywhere. Shangguan Bing Shui knew that it was impossible for her to dodge this attack unless her agility was 2 or 3 times her current one, which was simply insane in her eyes. Therefore, she gritted her teeth and activated the skill she obtained when she successfully evolved to First Order and acquired her unique class, Charming Ice. Charming Eye. Shangguan Bingshue's blue eyes brightened intensely, and the little remaining mana was forcibly moved by her magic, activating the skill and sending all her power into her eyes. A strange aura invisible to the naked eye came from her gaze, and when her eyes met the fluorescent golden eyes of the beast, the rune bear's movements stalled. It was only 2 seconds, but Shangguan Bingshue took advantage of that time to rush back, creating over 300 meters of distance between her and the beast, even with her stamina considerably consumed. If she had more attack power, she could have tried to counterattack and might even have gained the victory. After all, 2 seconds was too long in a battle to the death between existences capable of moving at such fast speeds. However, Shangguan Bingshue did not currently possess such an ability. The difference in power was simply as great as when she faced the first-order anti-magic zombie back then. The most she could do was to activate the attack skill of the blazing ring. Crimson flames enveloped the beast and began to slowly consume it. However, 2 seconds later, the rune bear seemed to awaken from its daze when a roar filled with fury that shook the entire forest drove out the surrounding flames after a loud burst of mana. With some burns on its white fur, the beast seemed to turn into a cannonball again, and in a moment the distance of 300 meters was completely erased. Seeing the beast's claw descending, the world seemed to slow down for Shangguan Bingshue as death weighed down on her. But it did not help her, and a bitter smile unconsciously appeared on her face. Her pretty eyes did not glitter with fear or worry. Nor did there seem to be sorrow for not having achieved something in her eyes. However, an incredibly bitter and unwilling sparkle shone in them. She was not willing. Unfortunately, she had no more energy to run at full speed, and all her mana had been consumed when she activated Charming Eye. Just then, an explosion of lightning echoed throughout the forest, and the beast's movements stopped as its golden eyes, for the first time, flashed with a small tinge of dread. The beast quickly halted its attack and instead lashed backward with its right paw from the top down. Boom! Blood Warlock, Succubus Partner in the Apocalypse. Chapter 185. Face-to-face clash against the Second Order. The sound of lightning from the distance was approaching at breakneck speeds, even faster than the descent of the Second Order bear's claw. The bitter look in Shangguan Bingshue's blue eyes disappeared, replaced by a look of pleasant surprise. This man is finally here. Such a thought flashed in her mind, along with the appearance of what she thought was gone, hope for survival. The Second Order bear's eyes, that until now had only revealed emotions of anger and disdain towards its enemies, widened slightly, and a hint of caution and even a faint tinge of fear flickered in them. The beast did not dare to act in the same manner as it had been doing so far. It was not even hesitating for a moment before it turned around and swiped its claw from the top down with all its power to greet the incoming attack. Boom! An explosion that was even more terrifying than the 20 grenades exploding together earlier shook the battlefield. The survivors cried out in fright while covering their ears, and some of the gunmen who were closest to the explosion directly fainted on the spot with bleeding ears. Shangguan Bingshue had already lost most of her stamina, and the lack of mana in her body made her feel anemic, so being the closest to the center of the impact, she was sent flying almost 10 meters away along with Kai Jingyi in her arms. Ugh! Shangguan Bingshue complained, and even on the ground raised her face to see the situation before her. Roar! A roar that was nothing like the roars it had made before came from the Second Order monster's maw. The beast retreated 12 steps as its right arm, with which it had attacked, previously bled horribly. Spurt after spurt of blood poured out of the beast's arm, which seemed to be covered in bloody cracks. Its once perfect white fur had already been slightly stained by blood, but this time the wound it had received was on a completely different level. A blood-red spear reflected the sun's rays. The tip of the spear had pierced from side to side the Second Order bear's arm, stopping right in the center of the palm, which now had a 10-centimeter thick hole through which blackish blood gushed out. The beast looked out into the forest with bloodshot eyes and roared ominously again. Bai Zemin slowly emerged from the shadows of the forest with an expression as cold as ice. He momentarily ignored the beast, and his eyes scanned the battlefield. Seeing the nearly 20 dead bodies as well as the absence of more than 30 survivors, the gaze in his eyes turned cold to the point where even he would be afraid of himself if he looked into a mirror. At the same time, an aura filled with murderous intent was released from his body as he looked at the Second Order bear as if it were a dead corpse. This was the first time Bai Zemin had lost soldiers under his banner. What was worse was that the numbers of survivors who had died could not be counted as few, and even if it was already good enough that most of them were alive considering that the enemy was a second-order existence, he felt the blood inside his body boil with fury. Previously, Bai Zemin had seen from a distance that Shangguan Bingshui and Kai Jingyi were about to be smashed to death by the second-order bear, and even with his agility boosted 70 points by lightning movement, it was impossible for him to save them. Therefore, he created a blood spear by directly spending 200 mana points and taking advantage of the powerful speed boost. He threw it with all his strength forward to force the beast to stop, or else it would be seriously injured. After all, a spear filled with so much mana was nothing to scoff at, and even less so when such a piercing weapon was propelled forward at such a terrifying speed. Unfortunately, Bai Zemin was unable to cast his most powerful attack skill, Crimson Blood Judgment. If he launched that skill, he was confident of defeating an almost dead second-order existence. However, everyone in the area would probably also be slaughtered, and such a loss was one that Bai Zemin could not afford. Still, the result was more than satisfactory. Due to burning anger, he couldn't help but laugh as he looked at the beast's right arm, now immobile on its side. As a blood berserker, Bai Zemin's overall attack power increased by 20% when using spears, another 20% when using blood attacks, and another 20% when facing beings more powerful than him. In other words, his job alone granted him a terrific 60% boost in general attack power. However, with Blood Will fully charged to the top, things were completely different. The current Bai Zemin had 110% more overall attack power than in normal times. Even a second-order beast would have to pay the price if it dared to take such an attack directly, as could be seen on the beast before his eyes. The blood vessels all over the second-order bear's right arm had popped out in a bloody mess. Pieces of flesh came off its practically destroyed hand, and the pain reflected in the creature's gaze was enough for anyone to understand how gruesome such an attack was. Suddenly, the second-order bear stomped the ground beneath its feet with vigor and lunged towards him like an unstoppable torpedo. Bai Zemin coldly snorted and pointed in front of him as he said indifferently, "Bang, bang." The blood spear that was filled and created with his own mana exploded with astonishing loudness. The second-order bear stopped abruptly and roared again in pain as the entirety of its already severely injured right hand was sent flying through the air, splattering flesh and blood everywhere. Seizing the opportunity, Bai Zemin shot forward at lightning speed and leapt into the air before punching downward with all his might. His fist seemed to want to crush the beast's head, and even the surrounding air could not withstand the pressure, creating a mighty bang. The second-order bear's eyes glowed ominously, and ignoring the pain after losing its right hand, it swung ferociously with its left claw in a mighty swing. Boom! Bai Zemin's fist and the beast's left foreleg collided, and a big shockwave burst out in the surroundings. The ground under the beast's feet cracked tremendously and, surprisingly, for the first time since his strength stat grew so high, Bai Zemin was directly sent flying 20 meters. His body slammed into several trees, knocking them down in the process, and only after destroying more than 5 did he manage to regain control of himself, driving both feet firmly into the ground and leaving 2 lines several meters long before finally coming to a halt. Strong. Bai Zemin's gaze grew even colder. He could feel the blood inside his body rushing, but before he was forced to cough up blood, he activated his blood manipulation skill and slowed down the blood flow immediately, thus returning it to normal. Blood Warlock, Succubus Partner in the Apocalypse. Chapter 186, Bai Zemin into a dangerous situation. Regardless of whether it was the gigantic armored elephants or any other first-order enemy Bai Zemin had faced so far, including the evolving level 50 armored elephant, none of these beasts managed to force him back when it came to pure strength. When his Xianyuan sword was not powerful enough, Bai Zemin would end the life of any of these enemies by bashing their skulls into a bloody mess and crushing their bones with his fists. Unfortunately, it seemed that this was not possible against the beast in front of him. Bai Zemin looked at his right hand for a moment and noticed how it trembled slightly due to the previous powerful impact. In addition, small dots of blood appeared on his skin that was even able to withstand gunfire. At least, not with my current strength. Bai Zemin thought silently, and a glint of resolve and madness flashed in his gaze. His current strength stat was 229 points, which made Bai Zemin a horrific monster that was almost 23 times stronger than a human being in excellent physical condition. Of course, excellent physical condition before the apocalypse, now, was only average at best. One could imagine how terrifying the attack power behind his fists was. But even then, all that amount of attack power compressed into his body, boosted by 20% from fighting with bare fists, another 20% from facing an enemy more powerful than him, and another 50% due to blood will, was not enough to fight the second-order bear. The lingering pain in his right hand, as well as the muscle pain his body felt after hitting huge trees to the point of shattering them into pieces, was just too great to be ignored. Xietain, seeing that he had no other choice, decided to do something that, while it was a pity, was the best option since he had no other way to break through the monster's defenses in front of him. With a quick thought, the 62 status points he had been carefully saving and had gathered after leveling up so diligently were consumed in a jiffy. A strange stinging feeling, strange to describe, hit every cell of Xietan's body, and the great increase in stats was such that even he could feel his soul growing stronger, just as when he absorbed a great amount of soul power from powerful enemies. Bang! The second-order bear stomped the ground with a bang and charged towards him like a cannonball. Its golden eyes seemed to have turned blood red as anger and the desire to end his life overwhelmed its existence, to the point that the beast's aura became chaotic. Xietain advanced instead of retreating. He clenched his right fist with all his might and punched forward with all his strength as he raised his left arm to head height to block the incoming attack. Boom! Xietan's fist connected with the beast's left claw again, and a powerful explosion shook the surroundings once more. The second-order bear retreated 5 steps, while Xietain was forced to retreat more than 10 in total. The result had made it clear who had the advantage if it came down to pure strength alone. Even after adding all those points to strength, Xietain was still inferior to the second-order bear. But he wasn't too surprised by this, as considering the way he had been sent flying before, forcing his enemy back and still being able to stand his ground was surprising in itself. You are more powerful than me as far as strength is concerned. Xietain took a step forward as he looked at his enemy, and blue lightning flashed over his body at steady speeds. But I wonder if you are faster than me. He didn't just rely on his strength stat to fight. The sound of lightning spread everywhere as Xietan's body became a blur for a moment before disappearing from the sight of the survivors, who were looking on from a distance with fear-filled eyes. The second-order bear was startled, and its gaze scanned the surroundings until it finally noticed the hated enemy that had wounded it in such a way. The beast also charged forward, and when it arrived before him, it furiously slashed once more. However, Xietain quickly tilted his body at a strange angle, just barely successfully avoiding the beast's claw, and taking advantage of the speed boost, he fiercely punched the beast directly in the stomach. Boom! The second-order bear opened its mouth, seemingly about to roar in surprise or pain. However, Xietain punched the exact same spot 2 more times in the blink of an eye. Boom! Boom! With so little time between each attack, the beast's body was lifted slightly off the ground due to the gathered power. The second-order bear felt its internal organs shake violently, and at the same time as a spurt of blood escaped from its mouth, the runes on its chest glowed in a terrifying amber shade. What is this? Xietain was startled and quickly backed away. However, the beast roared just then, and a powerful sound wave assaulted Xietain. For a moment he felt his world spinning, but soon, the spiritual earring in his left ear let out a faint pale glow, and that strange feeling of dizziness disappeared, leaving behind only some headache. Spiritual attack. Xietain was shocked. This was the first time he had encountered this kind of attack, so he didn't know how to react to the appearance of one. If not for the spiritual earring that he had obtained by chance after he killed the strongest leader Yiqigong back then, Xietain might have fallen into serious troubles. However, I can only ignore 2 more spiritual attacks. Xietain quickly remembered that the spiritual earring only protected him from 3 spiritual attacks each day, of which 1 had already been used. The second-order bear's eyes glowed strangely as it saw that its enemy was fine even after receiving its attack. The beast charged and swiped out again. It seemed that the creature knew nothing else but to strike with its only healthy foreleg. Xietain advanced once more, and after blocking the incoming attack, which almost forced him to his knees due to the power behind the blow, he countered with his own attack and shook the beast once more. However, just as Xietain was about to put some distance, his expression changed tremendously as he realized that he couldn't actually move. When he looked down, Xietan's face turned white as he saw that at some point, the beast before him had managed to step on one of his feet without him being aware of it. With the monster's superior strength, Xietain could not even take a single step back. Seizing the opportunity, the second-order bear swung its left and right arm in one swift movement. Xietain was caught off guard and his body was tightly embraced by the monster before being lifted off the ground. There was nowhere for him to run, even his arms had been blocked. Blood Warlock, Succubus Partner in the Apocalypse. Chapter 187 Raged Xietain. When the survivors saw Xietain being caught by the powerful arms of the enemy beast, they all cried out in panic and unconsciously wanted to flee frantically, only to be hurriedly stopped by Xietain and Zhongde, who knew that splitting up at this moment would be the worst possible option. Even the leader was caught by that monster. It's the end. The survivors and even the 30-plus armed men turned pale and began to lose all hope. Shangguan Bingshui slowly stood up and her heart squeezed before sinking when she saw Xietain fall into the enemy's trap. This second-order bear was clearly smarter than a normal beast, or else it wouldn't know how to set simple traps or such fighting moves. From the very beginning of the battle, Shangguan Bingshui watched to her utter disbelief as somehow or other, Xietain managed to wound the second-order beast and even fight against such a horrific creature. That alone was a pleasant surprise for her and everyone else, as it meant that hopes were not yet as completely dark as they thought. However, it was hard to say that now considering the situation. The battle so far had barely lasted 1 minute at most, so Shangguan Bingshui had not yet recovered enough mana to be able to help and do anything meaningful in a battle of such magnitude. Although her physical stats were high, most of her power came from her main skill Ice Maker. It was impossible for her current physical attributes to be enough to do anything worth mentioning. Xietain growled and his eyes widened as the second-order bear began to tighten its grip on him with monstrous strength. The eyes of Lilith, who had now mingled with the survivors unnoticed, glittered with overwhelming worry as she looked at the scene from a distance helplessly. Her heart was beating 1,000 miles an hour and her palms were covered in sweat. She knew how strong Xietain was, but facing a second-order beast was a little too early for the current him. He needed to evolve his main skill before he could have a real chance of killing such a creature. You can't die here. You definitely can't. Your path definitely can't be broken here. She thought to herself with her heart squeezed to the point that it began to ache. Crack. Crack. Xietain cried out in pain as the bones in his body threatened to shatter into dust under the beast's cruel grip. A thin trickle of blood trickled from the corner of his lips and little by little his weak internal organs began to suffer. His blood manipulation skill allowed him to control the blood inside his enemy's body to a certain extent. However, it was not as easy as it seemed. Xietain had many limits. One of these limits was that, depending on the enemy's level and order, the effect of blood manipulation would be greatly affected, reducing the effectiveness of the skill greatly. Lilith had previously told him that for an existence to have a chance of evolving to second order they needed to be level 50. Simply put, the bear in front of him was at the very least level 50. Back then, Xietain had made the first order blazing beetle suffer greatly when he made the blood boil inside its body after expending all of his mana. While it was true that the mana he had in the past was absolutely incomparable to the current one, the difference between the first order and the second order was simply too great, as an existence was capable of acquiring more skills and a new job or upgrading the old one. Still, Xietain tried. He directly consumed 100 mana points with the intention of making his enemy squirm in pain in order to have a chance to escape from its hold. However, the beast's lips seemed to curve into a bloodthirsty smile and the runes on its body glowed brightly. Soon, Xietain noticed that all the mana he had used seemed to disappear as it entered the beast's body to activate his skill. His face turned pale at the horrifying realization that this beast even had an anti-magic skill, powerful physical abilities, spiritual attacks, and magical immunity. The second-order bear was undoubtedly one of the worst enemies that could currently exist. The sound of his bones threatening to break spread throughout the battlefield, and Xietain could barely contain his screams by biting his lips hard to the point of tearing them apart. His feet were off the ground, his hands and arms trapped, and his whole body firmly pressed against the monsters so he couldn't even move. It seemed like the end of the line. However, when Xietain thought on his loved ones, on his promise with Lilith, and when he saw the mocking look in his enemy's golden eyes, something seemed to break inside him. Kill me? You want to kill me? I'll eat you alive. Xietain was no longer thinking with any clarity, and the blood in his body began to rush uncontrollably, desiring nothing more than to fight and slaughter the enemy before him. Damn beast. Fuck you. After a bellow filled with murderous intent that terrified all the surrounding creatures, Xietain pushed forward the only part of his body he could move, his head. Under everyone's disbelieving and terrified eyes, Xietain opened his mouth wide and viciously bit the bear's left eye. Roar. Xietan's teeth were like indestructible metal pincers. When it clung firmly to that part of the body that was weak but strong enough to even resist the impact of bullets, the beast's left eye exploded in a bloody mess. The bear roared in pain and unconsciously released its grip on him as it backed up several steps with its mind in shock. Swoosh. The wind howled, and before the wounded beast could react, Xietan's fist had viciously smashed its head. Boom. The bear was sent flying nearly 10 meters before falling noisily to the ground. However, before it could move with the pain obstructing its thoughts and instincts, the sound of lightning echoed all around as 3 Xietain appeared and began to strike its already dizzy head. Bang. 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 Although each clone only had 10% of his total power, 10% was enough to make the beast feel no better, considering it had just lost one eye and then received a hard blow to the head. The second-order bear, furious and with a face covered in its own blood, opened its single eye wide and roared ferociously as the runes on its chest glowed brightly. The sound wave struck the 3 clones, causing them to explode into tiny motes of light and lightning. However, just as the beast stood up, the wind behind it shook and a Xietain with a bloodied face appeared. His body was covered in lightning and blood, while the look in his eyes seemed to be bloodshot. It looked like he had transformed into a beast just like the bear. Boom. His fist once again hit the beast, impacting hard against its back, causing the beast to cough up blood and stagger several steps forward. Blood Warlock, Succubus Partner in the Apocalypse. Chapter 188, Invisibility. Seeing Xietain break free, Lilith's eyes sparkled and she unconsciously let out a sigh of relief. The tension on her shoulders largely disappeared, and as she looked at that face that was not especially handsome considering the large number of higher existences and other beings she had seen throughout her life, she felt that even covered in blood it was especially charming. Shangguan Bingshui also felt such relief that her slender legs grew weak from the constant up and down of contrary emotions, almost falling to the ground once again. She did not particularly care about the bloodthirsty way in which Xietain broke free. To Shangguan Bingshui, the method was not what mattered. What was really important was to win and survive no matter how gruesome what had to be done. As if he had gone mad, Xietain charged again and punched the beast's back once more before it turned around with a fierce backward swing of its claw. Bang! Xietain popped out in a pile of lightning, startling the beast again. Boom! From the top, Xietain seemed to fall from the sky and with a powerful kick forced the second-order bear straight to the ground, making a crater of nearly 20 meters in the process. Kai Jingyi had the active skill Stealth, just like Fu Xiefeng. Precisely for that reason she was able to take advantage of this skill along with lightning movement to surprise everyone earlier. However, Xietan's skill was even better than Stealth. When the 11 first-order beasts were killed by him, a skill scroll had fallen and Xietain had not seen it until nightfall. He was very surprised when he discovered that the scroll was the first-order active skill level 1 Invisibility. Invisibility, first-order active skill, level 1, consume 20 mana points to activate. For the next 10 seconds, erase your presence from the enemy sight. The effect of the skill can be countered by visual skills, and when attacking, the effect is automatically cancelled. Cooldown time, 5 seconds. After long consideration, Xietain had decided to learn Invisibility. Although he barely had one free slot left for active skills, he felt relieved at this moment as this skill together with the lightning movement cloning skill, he had an opportunity to come out victorious in this battle. Xietain lunged forward and slammed into the beast again before retreating, barely dodging a fierce kick from the monster. While he was in midair, he checked his mana. I still have just over 70 points left. He thought silently as his mind was racing with what to do next. While he seemed to have gone mad, the only thing he had lost was all inhibition in battle. His sense of thought was as clear as ever. Since magic was ineffective unless it was cast at a surprisingly high speed or from a hidden spot, using his blood manipulation skill would not produce a great deal of results. This meant that Xietain could only rely on pure physical power in this battle and, unfortunately, his human physique was inferior to that of a beast that was already more powerful by nature but now even surpassed him in levels and order. Shangguan Bing Shui, the IFVs. Xietain shouted as he gave her a gaze before dashing like lightning into the distance. The second order bear, battered and wounded, roared before dashing forward at full speed. Its only healthy eye had nothing but Xietain, who had wounded it to such an extent. It was the supreme lord of this area. Everyone who had dared to challenge it had been devoured with their soul power absorbed. It had even begun to develop a mind of its own with simple thoughts. Such humiliation was simply unacceptable. In just a second, the two disappeared from the sight of all the survivors. From a distance, they could hear the constant sound of explosions and the cracking of lightnings. Shangguan Bing Shui's eyes glittered as she remembered Xietan's gaze and words before disappearing into the shadows of the forest. She ignored the dizziness she felt and appeared before one of the military soldiers. "Do you or any of your comrades know how to control the M3 IFVs?" she asked, her voice as cold as eternal ice. The soldier, startled, nodded and stammered, I and Shun Yin have some knowledge of dash. Shangguan Bing Shui interrupted impatiently, "Who is this Shun Yin?" Unconsciously, the soldier looked at one of his comrades. Shangguan Bing Shui nodded, and before the two men knew it, they were lifted up by two huge ice hands. She was not comfortable with touching them in any way and preferred to spend mana to keep them from freezing rather than touch them directly, which, considering her intelligence and the current situation, showed how reluctant she was to do so. Soon, she disappeared like a whirlwind of icy air in the direction of the military camp, leaving behind a few words. "You guys wait here and don't move." Chen He, Zhong De, and a completely exhausted Kai Jingyi looked at each other in fright and quickly got to work. None of them had the power to do anything in such a battle. All they could do was to secure the lives of the rest, preventing the other beasts from getting too close. The second order bear was incredibly fast. There was no doubt about this. However, with lightning movement active, Xietan's agility stat was 282. Even a second-order beast like the rune bear was slightly inferior, so no matter how much the beast chased, it failed to catch up. As two shadows, one white and one black with blue flashes occasionally glowing around, Xietain and the second-order bear flashed through the forest at speeds that could only be described as frightening from the point of view of any human or creature that had not yet properly evolved. Trees were hacked to pieces by the furious bear, without even bothering to dodge them. When a frightened creature appeared in the middle of the road, Xietain unsheathed his sword and in one swift motion cut it in two, thus keeping Blood Will at its maximum and resetting the timer to 5 minutes again. In just a few seconds, both beings had covered several kilometers of distance, and before he knew it, Xietain had reached the main road as he halted his footsteps in his tracks. The second-order bear continued the charge, and when it arrived in front of its hated enemy, it didn't even hesitate as it slashed downward with all its might. Boom! The concrete floor cracked and the earth shook fiercely. A powerful shockwave rippled through the surroundings, and the air erupted in an uproar, unable to withstand the pressure of the blow. However, to the dismay and to further fuel the fury of the beast, Xietain had disappeared. The Xietain before the beast once again burst into motes of light and tiny flashes of lightning. Although the second-order bear had begun to gain intelligence, it still could not compare to an adult human being like Xietain and could hardly be considered an infant. Therefore, the beast looked at the surroundings in confusion and anger. "Let me see how you withstand this now," Xietain thought viciously as his body flew several meters high into the air. Blood Warlock, Succubus Partner in the Apocalypse. Chapter 189, Combustion and Explosion. After creating a clone and leaving it right in his previous position while activating first-order invisibility, Xietain moved like a shadow and jumped high into the sky. In just a second, he had left the ground behind and was more than 10 meters high, but even then he was still ascending. Seeing how the second-order bear crushed his lightning clone and the cracks spread all over the concrete, unable to withstand the impact and pressure of the attack, Xietan's gaze flashed coldly as he turned his body so that the forest were the other survivors and the armed arsenal was at his back. With his right hand extended forward, the blazing ring glowed with a faint crimson radiance as Xietain activated the rare-grade treasure skill without hesitation. Bang! A powerful flare of red flames shot out towards the ground in a northwest direction, and the invisibility skill was immediately cancelled. Hearing the sound from above, the mighty beast looked up hurriedly, and under the bright glare of the sun, it could barely see the shadow of its hated enemy several meters away. Not caring about the crimson flames advancing in its direction or perhaps relying on its anti-magic skill, the second-order bear put all the strength of its body into its feet and with a mighty boom on the ground shot into the sky like a cannonball. Seeing this, Xietain laughed out loud. His laughter contained both mockery and anger as the hurricane necklace on his chest lit up with a faint pale green glow, and before the beast could react, a whirlwind over 10 meters in diameter shot out towards the ground, reaching the crimson flames in a millisecond. Boom! The mighty hurricane of wind struck the crimson flames, increasing their power immeasurably. What could previously be considered a blaze had suddenly transformed into a flame monster over 200 meters in diameter at the same time as a powerful explosion shook the surroundings. Ugh! Xietain was sent flying straight backward due to the power of the explosion, and due to the fact that he was in mid-flight, he couldn't even properly control his body at the same time as the burning heat assaulted his face. However, the second-order bear took a much worse part. The beast was directly engulfed by the blazing fire monster, and its seemingly unstoppable body was directly sent flying backward again, hitting the hard ground with such ferocity that cracks with more than 100 meters stretched along the concrete and even extended into the forest. Roar! A terrifying roar that resounded everywhere scared the surrounding beasts, and those who were in the outer areas of the forest could not help against that fear, which forced them to go deeper to get away from the place as fast as possible. Xietain soon landed on the ground 200 meters away and quickly climbed a tree in the forest behind him while looking ahead with a cold expression. Although he could not activate third-order Crimson Blood Judgment because it was a skill that Xietain had not mastered and needed a long time to form a weapon that could withstand the power of that skill, only the elemental union of wind and fire from the hurricane necklace and the blazing ring contained power that could not be ignored in any way. When a large amount of wind envelopes a flare, it is natural for a powerful explosion to occur due to the sudden increase of oxygen which generates excess combustion. Xietain sneered as he looked at the results of the explosion. The entire forest to the left or right 300 meters away, with the road as the center, was practically destroyed beyond recognition. The green grass was gone, replaced by dirty earth. The trees were crushed to the point where they became nothing more than a pile of small wood chips or sticks scattered everywhere. Besides, he narrowed his eyes and gazed as a silhouette writhed amidst the flames that burned the opposite forest. Roar! Roar! The second-order bear writhed in pain as it roared steadily. At the moment of the explosion, the beast had used its handless right arm to cover its head. As a result, its entire arm had been sent flying into the distance, which showed how terrifying the power of the explosion had been, which was completely normal considering the great destruction of the surroundings. The reason why such an explosion did not happen when Xietain activated Crimson Blood Judgment was because Crimson Blood Judgment was a magical skill that united different magical skills perfectly by using blood manipulation as the main catalyst. However, without blood manipulation as the core, the two magical skills of the two treasures came into conflict due to their obvious differences, which caused such a horrifying explosion. All of this had already been calculated by Xietain, but now he needed to see how much damage he could inflict on his enemy. The deep crimson flames resembled a raging sea that surrounded the second-order bear's body at the same time as it spread a little into the opposite forest. The beast roared not only in pain but also to shake the surrounding flames. Each roar charged with mana, and the beast's own magic sent out blasts that expelled the flames from its body. However, these flames were immediately replaced by other flames without giving it a single break. Even so, Xietain noticed to his dismay that the sea of crimson flames seemed to be gradually being extinguished as if a freezing winter storm suddenly swept through the world. At the end of the day, a second-order beast was a beast that possessed two magical skills or even more. Especially the bear in front of him, who also possessed terrifying physical abilities such as outstanding agility and terrifying strength as well as a large amount of stamina. Approximately 2 minutes later, the flames surrounding the beast were successfully expelled. The previously snow-white fur of the second-order bear was now 100% scorched to the point where the strange archaic runes on its body could no longer be seen anywhere as its entire body was carbon black. Its only healthy eye glittered with pain, anger, shame, exhaustion, and many emotions that would normally be impossible to perceive in the eyes of an animal before the intervention of the soul record with the earth's mana. Its entire right arm was gone and burnt-smelling blood was steadily pouring out of its body as what appeared to be a cloud of fiery vapor surrounded it. "Not so brave now, big guy?" Xietain sneered, earning a roar from his enemy. Without waiting for more, Xietain confirmed that he had just over 50 mana points remaining, which meant he could activate invisibility only 2 more times or any other skill a few times depending on his own control. Then, he lunged forward and clenched his fist tightly before fiercely striking the beast's chest with a powerful bang. Wounded in such a way, the beast had lost a large part of its power. Receiving Xietan's punch directly in the chest, the huge bear was sent flying like a kite whose string had been cut while blood splattered everywhere. Blood Warlock, Succubus Partner in the Apocalypse. Chapter 190 Fierce Battle to the Death. The second order bear reacted faster than Xietain expected, as even before he could strike a second punch, the beast turned its body and roared while the runes that were on its scorched fur glowed brightly with a demonic amber color. The sound wave that represented the activation of a spirit-type attack skill flew towards Xietain. However, he decided not to jump aside and instead continued charging forward. As the spiritual attack assaulted his mind and soul, the spiritual earring in his left ear let out a faint pale glow. Xietan's mind cleared immediately, leaving only a small headache similar to a small prick. "I can only take one more attack head-on," Xietain thought as his fist once again connected fiercely against the beast's chest. Bang! Apart from the bang sound, the sound of bones breaking echoed everywhere, and the second-order bear roared painfully at the same time as its chest caved inward slightly. Unconsciously or not, just as it was sent flying by Xietan's attack, the beast forcefully swung its left fist, surprising him greatly. Not expecting such a reaction, Xietain hurriedly raised both arms to cover himself, and when the beast's claw hit his body he felt as if a truck had hit him. Bang! Still, he held his ground, barely retreating half a step. Xietain bit his tongue to fight the pain and lunged forward again while creating 2 lightning clones. The second-order bear was incredibly enraged, as that very skill had been one of the main reasons for its current miserable state. However, in the midst of all that fury, the fear of death began to spread through every fiber of its existence. First-order beasts, unlike unclassified beasts, hunted enemies for the purpose of evolution. In other words, they were aware of the evolutionary path before them and did not know what fear was. They generally did not retreat from any combat, with the first-order anti-magic zombie that the group killed at the university being a special rarity. The unclassified beasts only hunted wildly out of pure instinct. There was no fear, and even in the last moments of life they only wanted to devour their enemies. On the other hand, the second-order beasts were beginning to develop intelligence and self-awareness. They hunted not only to evolve, but also to understand more about themselves and the world around them. At the same time, the feeling of fear began to be born as a consequence of that intelligence and conscience that was not present before but now was. With its right arm completely destroyed, with its body completely burned, and with wounds so serious that they hurt horribly, the second-order bear began to have thoughts of retreating from the battle. However, the scornful look that Xietain was giving it, as well as his constant words filled with ridicule, hurt the pride of one of the forest kings so much that this thought of retreat was being forcibly suppressed by the bear. Bang! As if they had planned it in advance, both beings, one first-order and one second-order being, rushed forward. The ground beneath the feet of both exploded and concrete flew everywhere as they looked at each other with eyes filled with nothing but desire to fight, defeat their opponent, survive, absorb each other's soul power, and evolve into something higher. Xietain was aware that if he managed to kill the enemy before him and absorb its soul power, he would become much stronger. However, the second-order bear was also aware of this fact. Although the human before it was one stage below it, his battle power was surprisingly frightening. With a roar in mid-motion, the spiritual earring once again glowed, fending off the attack. However, the 2 clones immediately exploded into a bunch of small flashes and motes of light. At the same time, the remaining claw of the beast clashed hard against Xietan's 2 fists. Boom! The crater resulting from the previous explosion grew deeper as a cloud of dust and dirt flew everywhere. But no matter whether it was Xietain or the second-order bear, both ignored this and began to fight fiercely. Boom, boom, boom. Fists, kicks, elbows, knees, Xietain used every part of his body to beat the giant beast before him, managing to increase its injuries more and more. However, because he had decided to ignore all defense to attack with more power and ferocity, he too was by no means unscathed. Bang! The left paw struck by Xietain in his right rib. The pain of the blow made his face contort horribly as the cracking sound echoed softly amidst his counterattack, forcing the beast to spit out even more blood. At least one rib had been cracked. Bang! The second-order bear managed to hit by Xietain with a kick and his left arm was incapacitated, so he responded with a vicious left blow to the beast's skull, plunging it in a frightening and dangerous manner as several bones in the head were broken. The battle only got bloodier and bloodier as the seconds ticked away and turned into minutes. It had been 4 minutes in total since Xietain and the second-order bear had started fighting, but both were in miserable states. No one would be able to recognize them if they saw them at this point. Xietain was covered in his own blood and the blood of his enemy all over. His left arm hung gently at his side and his face had a horrible claw cut on it. However, his eyes sparkled brightly and he seemed to have no intention of giving up until he was victorious. On the other hand, the bear was not much better. In fact, its condition was even more miserable. Its right arm was long gone, its once white fur was now completely carbonized black and dried, burnt-smelling blood covered its body. Its head was tilted to one side as a strange cavity had appeared there, almost leaving the pulsating brain in plain sight. In addition, a large area of the chest was now so badly hollowed out that it was surprising how the beast could still stand upright. Both seemed to be at the end of the line and a single error or oversight could cost the life of one of them. Completely focused on the battle and the enemy before them, both were unaware of the sound of engines rapidly approaching in this direction. It was only when an urgent voice reached him that Xietain finally regained some clarity. "Move away. Quickly." Shangguan Bing Shui's unmistakable fairy-like voice startled Xietain, but he didn't even linger for a moment and quickly expended the little mana he had left to do something that caught the beast off guard. The blood of the beast itself suddenly hardened and like snakes with free will coiled around its body, stopping its movements momentarily. At the same time, Xietain stomped the ground beneath his feet and with a mighty leap retreated several meters in less than a second. Out of the corner of his eye he caught sight of several modern war vehicles speeding out of the forest.